Welcome to another edition of the Empower Hour. I am Al Kumar.
And I am Hanifa.
And we do this each and every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. We come to you midweek and take an impactful topic of discussion that affects our everyday lives. And we bring it to you with your help, of course, the studio audience's help. Today's topic is, what do you really know about politics? And in the studio with us today, we have some wonderful special guests. Wala Blagay is here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. As well as Crystal Oriatha.
Perfect.
All right, I said it right. And they're here to help us with this topic of discussion. I wanted to do this show because, we hear all the time, vote, get out and vote, or rock the vote, or vote for me, I'm your, county council member, da-da-da. But what does those titles represent? What is involved with all the facets of the political arena?
Because there's so many.
It's so
and
many.
Usually people don't know, so you kind of focus
I don't know.
Yes.
And if I don't know, I'm sure
yes.
there's a lot of the general public out there who don't know either. Mm-hmm. And so you guys are here to help break these titles and descriptions down for us. Right. So, cool. Right. Can you just briefly share with us who you are and how you fit into the political realm?
Well, no problem. My name is Wala Blagay, and I am an attorney. I have worked in a variety of areas. I'm currently the staff attorney for the DC Nurses Association. I advocate for nurses before a variety of places legally, and I lobby for them also. So I do lobbying in both the city through the city and actually on Capitol Hill sometimes. I'm also an advocate in the community. I have a show, Chat with a Lawyer, that I bring lawyers to kind of do what you're doing now, let them know what their rights are from a legal perspective, so we really don't focus on politics. Sometimes we have politicians come in who talk about things that, because some of these things run into law. And I've been an advocate for a while. I was on the board of ACLU where we fought for criminal justice reform. I was on with the Maryland Legislative Agenda for Women where we fought against domestic violence in our community and also pay equity issues. I worked with the Maryland Consumer Protection Coalition where we focused in on protecting seniors in our community from being targeted. So that's something that I've focused on, and I've focused on a lot of various issues, including human trafficking. I was on the Human Relations Commission, and we focused in on trafficking when law enforcement let me know that they were going in homes and finding beds with girls on them, and all out. When you got a house where you walk in, there's nothing but beds, something's going on,
yes.
right? So they found that, and that's in our community, and actually sometimes they target even certain communities that quiet end of the street, so then that way nobody's watching at a certain point. So I've been an advocate for a while, so I understand actually the importance of knowing who and what, because a lot of times you find that people are focused on county issues and then they go to the state delegates and complain about them. And then the state delegate says, well, you need to talk to the county person, and they're mad because they feel like that person is just, redirecting them because they don't want to deal with the problem. And vice versa. A lot of times people go to county council for state issues. In fact, that's more so because people know their county council individuals better than they know their state.
And we're definitely going to get into that. Yeah. But before we do, please, Crystal, share with the audience who you are, how you represent us in the political realm.
So, Crystal Oriatha, I am an organizer. That's kind of my background. I always just say I'm not a politician, I'm an activist, because I believe it's really important to be in that space and know what that means. So, similar to Wala, I've been fighting for issues that I believe are important, staying kind of in the background, working around policy, or if it's just lobbying for things that I think are right, lobbying against things I don't want to see affect our community, focusing for me a lot around mass incarceration. How do we break the school to prison pipeline? Mm-hmm. I work with a nonprofit as a communications director. I've been doing that for about 4 years now, and our main mission and vision is seeing the end to the school to prison pipeline. Mm-hmm. In our communities, we see that a lot, where we're using school as a holding cell, just preparing our children for prison, not preparing them for a job, not preparing them for the real world, or to be what we would call upstanding citizens. And how do we break that? Also looking at the food deserts. That's something important to me. how we don't have access to fresh food.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Sea Pleasant where we have a food desert, so I've been working with organizations to bring a farmer's market to Oakcrest. And so I'm excited that'll actually happen this summer.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm about how do we organize our communities that we're not necessarily waiting for politicians sometimes to meet us where we need them.
Right.
And how do we meet the needs of our communities ourselves?
Right.
But what I think is important and why I decided, along with WALA and organizers, to step up to the plate to run for office is because I feel like we need more activists and advocates in office,
Yeah.
people that come from that background. They've been doing the work with their sleeves rolled up, behind the scenes, for no name recognition, not for the money, because they're passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've also worked with Progressive Maryland as the chair for the Prince George's County chapter, and then worked as a consultant for the federal level around also human trafficking, domestic violence, and adolescent pregnancy prevention.
Oh, wow. Wow. Extensive resumes,
Mhm.
both of you ladies.
both,
Thank you
yeah.
so much, too, for all your work in the community. Hanifa, did you have any questions?
Not as yet.
Not yet?
No.
Okay, so what exactly are you running for?
So I'm running for county council for District 7. So
Okay.
that District 7 encompasses, when you think about inside the Beltway, so that's going to be like Sea Pleasant, Capitol Heights, a little bit of District Heights, Suitland, Temple Hills, a little bit of Oxon Hill. So as far up as Sea Pleasant, as far down as Oxon Hill, and going out to Morningside.
Yeah.
And the county council is your legislative branch on the local level. And
Okay.
so it's similar to what law is going to be doing on the state level, so the
Okay.
branch that writes legislation. And I decided to go for the county council just because I felt like that is where I see a missing piece when it comes to advocacy in
Yeah.
an elected official, in the sense that they look at things from a compassionate and a policy place.
Okay.
And I think that's what's missing there.
So if you had to describe to people who have no idea what a county council
Council, yeah.
member does,
Yes.
what would be the best description you can give them?
The best description, if I had to like strip it back to the bolts and notes, I'd say they write the budget, well, they approve the budget, right? So the county executive will push down a budget, and then the county council will go through it line by line, and they have power to change, veto, overrule things that he might want. On the school board side, they bring the budget to the county council, and again, they have the right to approve it. So everything budgetary, when it comes to all the services that the county gets, that goes to the county council. And then when it comes to policy, they also have the right to write different pieces of policy. So for example, the 5 for 15 is important to me. That would be raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
Okay.
That could happen on the state level, but it also could happen on the county level, because both sides are people that write legislation. They also over zoning. So their job is also to look at how we have zoning regulations. So for example, the new Suitland development, that's going to be mixed use. So that's deciding that you can have restaurants and you can have housing, and you can have all these in one facility. And then also they over health. So then when it comes to health policies and regulations in the county, that also goes through the county council.
Interesting stuff. Thank you for that breakdown.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, because a lot of people think of it as, when I ask people what's the most important thing you'd want me to do in this role, sometimes it's just the real basic stuff, which is still important, but it goes back to maybe like the trash pickup or roads, right? Which is important, but if you really think about every single thing that they have power on, you'd ask for more,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah, makes sense. Well, the same question. What are you running for, and the definition of your
So
job?
I'm running for state delegate. So state delegate in District 25, and just to go over the turf of District 25, it includes Upper Marlboro. So right now we are sitting in District 25. It includes Capitol Heights, District Heights, Forestville, Largo, Temple Hills, Camp Springs, Suitland, Morningside, Clinton, and Mitchellville. So we cover a lot, and it's interesting because in this way, the way they've cut the turfs, and we could talk about that. We're talking about knowing what's going on. The way they cut the turfs, to be honest, I'm going from one of the wealthiest parts of the county to the poorest.
What's the turf?
So you start up from Capitol Heights and you go all the way down to Clinton,
Okay.
and then everything in the middle.
Oh,
okay.
so it's like the parcel of land
Mhm.
that they have delegated, hence delegate? delegated to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, and understand that these lines are cut. That's some of the things, that's one of the things that we actually need to focus on. Now, District 25 at one point used to be all up to 214, right? 214 and around 202. That was considered to be District 25. Usually, the central part of the county has more issues in common, although it is a distinct difference from living in District Heights to living in Mitchellville. But now we've added South County with the move in. That's because somebody's moving these lines. And that's
so I was
because,
gonna ask
and
that.
these lines are being
Yeah.
cut. There's a
Yep.
commission that is appointed right now by elected officials, right? And elected officials meet and they start to draw the lines. And it's the most powerful people pick those positions. One of the biggest things that they're doing on a federal level, this has been a bigger discussion, but it needs to be a discussion on the state level, is that there should be an independent commission to cut the lines. And the independent commission means that there needs to be a commission that does not have any elected official, no elected officials is being part of. We have a part where they get in the commission, then no one can touch them.
right.
And they have to just draw the lines. What's happening now is elected officials are getting together. It's even less. At least on the federal level, there's some sort of outrage when you see how these lines are drawn. But on the state level, I've heard people say that somebody wanted to add their beach house to the district, so they drew the line so their beach house could be in the district. Or there was another story I heard where someone ran against a senator. He didn't like it, so he cut them out of the district. And he cut them out so bad that legitimately, if you walk across the street, you're outside of the district.
So what are the
Yeah.
benefits to cutting these lines? What are they doing? What are the motive behind why they do it?
So sometimes it's really to, first of all, sometimes it's actually to help somebody get in. Maybe try to cut it to help the person get in because they have a strong base in a certain place and they put it in there. Or sometimes it's to make somebody lose.
Is this
So they
similar to,
take,
like,
they
gerrymandering?
take,
Yes.
it's gerrymandering,
Okay,
basically.
all right, thank
It's
you.
gerrymandering. Basically, they would take certain people out of the district. Now, I will tell you, some of the most powerful people in our political system are white, right? And one of the biggest issues is that some of those people have watched the county go from white to black. And as it's turned black, some of them have gotten, some of the areas that they once grew up in that were majority white have turned black. And they recognize that many black people are going to see an older white man in a position and saying, well, maybe a black person that runs against them, I will vote for them. So what they've been doing is cutting those people out of district. If you look at one particular district, it goes from, it can't, because the county is so black, you can't call all the black people out. But what you could do is lessen their number in your district by cutting it
Yeah.
so much so that you have only a slither of it. So even if those people vote for your opponent, it's not the numbers. And of course, we all know the numbers. There are all these type of tools that even Crystal and I use to know how many people are voting. But just to get into what state delegate does, the state delegate passes laws to run the state. So the truth is, when you say it's not one particular thing that the state delegate does, as in, we pass laws on a variety of issues, from insurance to police account. Some of the bigger issues that people talk about, like for instance, in raising the minimum wage. Of course, we would do that on the state level, but we could even have an impact on whether the counties can raise their state. So that's how wide our range is. We deal with insurance. We deal with police accountability. We deal with schools. We deal with environment. We deal with, we are the the legislative body for the state. Very much like Congress. Now, people see it's more transparent in Congress. Congress passes laws that impacts everyone. On the state level, it's actually more so. It more impacts us because the state has more jurisdiction over, their own turf. So they can actually pass laws that impact us. Some of the federal laws have limitations, because of sort of the Constitution allowing the state to actually be able to have power of its own jurisdiction.
Is this the Maryland State Delegate? Is it like usually a male-dominated?
It is
woman.
mostly, no.
Okay.
So I'm not in 25. 25, we've actually been very lucky.
Okay.
So one of the few first women senators came from 25.
Okay.
So we have been actually lucky. In fact, what's alarming is that now I'm the only woman running, and
Right,
they're trying.
now.
And the ticket I'm running against establishment. They have 3 men.
Yes.
They have never, since I've moved to Prince George's. When I first moved to Prince George's County, you had I think Melanie Griffiths, who's now running for Senate. She was in office. Then there was Juanita Miller, 94th, in the 90s, all through since actually the 80s. There's been a woman representative in 25. if the establishment had it that way, there would be only one, and it will only be in Senate, not in the House.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to just distinguish the House from the House of Delegates have 141 members,
Okay.
so it's 3 delegates per district.
Okay.
But in the
That's
Senate,
in Maryland.
Yes.
specifically.
Right.
Okay.
in Maryland, 141. But the Senate is much, much less. It's 1 Senate per district. So what you find is that if in the House, you can actually get more things passed with more people. But then when you go to the Senate, it stops. Because there's only 1 person per district. So if that 1 person, if 1 or 2 people don't like it, they have a bigger impact on the bill's passage.
Is that something they're trying to change, maybe?
Well, it's in the Constitution.
Yeah,
You
it's
can't change it.
process.
Okay.
It's just like a known thing
Okay.
that bills go to die in the Senate.
Yeah.
You know,
okay.
because that you can really stop something good in the
Right.
Senate. And that's why it's so important to really elect strong advocates into the Senate, same as the delegation. But when you look at the Senate role, as you mentioned, if you don't have someone that's really strong to push something there,
Yeah.
it's easy that it could just fall to the wayside, especially because of how many bills they go through. Do you remember the count this last session? It was like you're talking about sometimes going through thousands of bills, right?
Yeah, it's usually thousands of bills, but
Yeah.
only a certain
Within a
group
what
does.
part of time? How much time do they
Yeah.
So
have to
we
go
have
through?
90 days. So let me actually tell you what the process is.
Right.
So when a bill is introduced by a state representative, usually they introduce it before the House, right? So it's called the first reading. And the
Okay.
first reading is an initial introduction.
Okay.
But much like any other body, even throughout the United States, once you have the first reading, it has to go to a committee. And the committee's jurisdiction is actually determined. There's some things that are written in law, but most of it is determined by the leadership. So if you have a health committee, health and operation, then it focuses on health. Judiciary focuses on a lot of judicial issues and even police issues
Right.
and all of those things. So then they go there. Sometimes, depending on how the bill is written, it can go to 2 different committees. It should have to go through one and another in order for passage. So that is actually the first sign of death, because you go, depending on what
Yeah.
committee you go to, if
You
the
won't
committee
go
committee chair would has to determine what the schedule is. So they determine whether you hold a hearing, they determine whether you whether there's a vote. They have a lot of power for the
And
committee
so this
chair.
is the committee chair is the people you go to before it gets to the Senate.
So yes, that's the Senate is way off. So
Okay.
you're still in the House.
Right.
So you have to get so what they have to do, it goes to a committee, and then the committee has to actually review it, have a hearing on it, and then they have to vote on it. Then it has to get out of the committee back to the floor of the House.
Do
Yeah.
we vote for these committee members?
No.
Well, you do. The
And-
committee members
yeah,
is me,
yeah,
because I
okay.
would be on one of the committees. Now, you can't. The committee chair, unfortunately, is not voted by the people. It's voted by the delegates. So we determine amongst ourselves who is the chair. But here's the thing: is that usually no, that's not right.
No,
I
they're
take that back.
appointed.
They're appointed. So they're appointed by leadership. So they're appointed by leadership. The chairs are appointed by leadership. So they determine who's in charge, and that person can determine whether your bill leaves the committee or not. Because if your bill does not leave the committee, then it cannot go to anywhere else. It's done. So then it goes back to the floor.
Yeah. It's
Lot.
cutthroat. I was in Annapolis once, and I was trying to get a bill on the floor. I was trying to get the bill in committee for review, and the person told me they're literally not putting it on review because they don't want to expose their committee members to a vote, because they know they'd vote probably the way we wouldn't want. And so they said they'll wait till it's an off year, it's not an election cycle, then they'll put it on the floor. Then they'll have it for review, because they know they probably won't vote the way most of us would want them to vote. So it's really tricky. You can have someone write something that's great, that you think this is what I've been waiting for, this piece
Right.
of legislation.
Because it's not
but
the right time.
Because they
For
feel
them.
it's not the right time, they won't even let it through committee.
Now, of course, this is not. I understand that this is it's bigger than you think. So, for instance, there's been a lot of domestic violence advocacy. You see Purple for Domestic Violence Month, but then the chairman of the committee of the judiciary does not let many domestic violence bills pass, and that's because some people believe that is because his clients are usually the people that, because he's a lawyer,
Okay.
his clients are usually the people that are being prosecuted
Gotcha.
for domestic violence.
Okay.
So he doesn't really let many things
Ooh.
pass, so they would die. So actually, a lot of women advocates, which usually are the people that are pushing these things, are usually
Right.
very frustrated because they get to this committee, they kind of don't have hope.
Mhm.
And then you have to put, so they put a lot of pressure on it, but even then he kind of lets it go. And
Mhm.
still, he's gotten reelected like many times.
So I'm
Mm-hmm.
listening to you guys, and the idea of, sometimes when you vote people in, some people, may ask the question, well, what did you do while you were in there? But this is a full-blown process. So you
Yeah.
can come in and push exactly what you ran on.
Right.
And not get
And not get
Exactly. So
anything
I'm glad
done.
that you guys are.
And that's a strategy that
Yeah.
some people will actually use. They will purposely stop something you did because they're plotting to use that against you when you run for reelection.
Oh, to say, oh,
To
you
say,
said you were
do-
going to do this,
and you didn't
this,
do
that.
anything, and nothing passed. But it was
Oh, wow.
they knew if they stopped every piece. They don't care if it was good for the people of their district or good for the
Interesting.
community. They know that they'll be able to use that to say, well, what bills did you write that got passed?
I have a question for both of you guys, and in no particular order. What are you guys? What is your top economic development priority? As running for the position that you're trying to get into, what would be your top economic development priority? What would you say?
For me, when I look at economic development, safeguarding around gentrification is the most important thing to me because I feel like it's a reality that's coming to Prince George's County. No one can tell me different. And I see it. And I see how if you don't have the right elected officials that understand how to safeguard, how to develop for the people that actually live here, not develop for the people you want here in 10 years. And there's a significant difference because when you even look at DC, yeah, it was developed nice, but everyone that voted those people in, they don't live there anymore. That's the reality. So when we want development in Prince George's County, how do you do it in a way that ensures that you're developing for the current residents, that they can actually enjoy the new development? So that's looking
Without
at
being
like
pushed out.
right, without being pushed out. So like inclusionary zoning is important to me. So if we have new development, that means basically if you have a new development come up and they want to build 70 units, and you say, well, build another 20, but those need to be at an affordable rate, but then you maybe don't have to pay the taxes on the 20, so that it's a give and take. You're making sure you're getting something that's affordable for your community, but you're not asking for something that's outrageous
Right.
on the back end. So making sure that we have things that make sense, making sure that we have earmarked funds that are going into schools that are marginalized. So I think economic development is infrastructure, but it's also education.
Yes.
I was just talking to someone that is moving to Howard County specifically for school. There was no other reason. They didn't want their kids going to school here. So that affects our economic development. I think making sure we
Here,
have,
as in PG County.
Here as in-
So they're moving out of PG
yes,
County. I got okay.
specifically
Yes.
because they said that their kids weren't getting the service they needed here, and they need to move somewhere else where they are. And they said past that they'd stay. They love it here. So that affects economic development
Because of the tax, right?
because, well, when it comes to education, that is a long issue, right? Because the money from the MGM, that's one issue I hear all the time. And where did it go? It didn't go
Which
towards
is a state
education.
issue.
Yes.
Which is something that it's so funny how these are where the things divide. But I wanted to talk about the smart growth,
Yeah.
the economic development issue because
Yes.
I'm actually going to focus in on smart growth legislation.
Okay.
One of the things that we have in Prince George's County is that there's no vision in how they develop. So one of the bigger problems is that they kind of throw things in every open space in town, right? I know I represent parts of my district includes Clinton and Upper Marlboro, and one of the biggest focus for them is like there's another, they're putting up homes at every corner. That's crowding in our schools, but that's also not helping anybody. Like that's just getting people, and part of it is that the lack of, and this is something that from Crystal can handle in the county council level, it is really the cronyism and the corruption in this county because developers make quick money off of building homes. It's quick money because if I build a condo in this building, somebody's gonna do it if I put the
Yes.
right price to it.
Yes.
But commercial development requires you to actually think through your think through because at the end of the day, businesses are not going to come unless they can make some money. So what we need to do is actually force the county to put an adequate plan together to ensure that any development that they come, that they don't break ground in open space until they fully develop what's already there, which we have not done.
No.
So, and if you do that,
that's
we
new
have-
evidence of
yeah.
how things
Yeah.
that
Right.
new mall around the corner. That
Right.
wasn't 5 years, and now everything is.
it's falling apart.
Yeah,
and
Largo.
they haven't. And my thing about it is that how
Like
can
that.
you go in Upper Marlboro and break ground in another area when you've got the boulevard that's pretty much that's
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, at this point, what smart growth legislation does is force them to actually build walkable communities. We have a lot of seniors in our community, and a lot of them that can't drive at night. You know what I mean? And they want to actually be able to get around. A lot of them depend too highly on the bus and Metro Access, which is not working well for them.
Right.
So they've expressed some frustration. So what we could do is actually build like small cities throughout, you know, but with vision. So
Yes.
now you see that they're about to have downtown Largo. You know, that's what they're talking about.
Yes.
But here's the thing: is like there's different phases to it. But here's the thing: we've got all these buildings, like things that people need that are all over, all in Bowie and places that people can't get to easily. Why don't we bring that in one place, right? So that people can walk around. You got people that want to take a bus place; they can take one place and go around.
Right.
So what we need to do is actually force this county to fully develop and have a vision for every proposal that they have, so that we don't waste resources, so we don't have environmental impacts on our community, and frankly, so that our senior community and people can get around it. Even the community that doesn't have a car can get around.
Yeah. Good points. Good points. What has to happen in politics for us to begin to see some drastic improvements? It just seems like, you know, it's no real, minus the harbor. The National Harbor was the biggest land development on the East Coast history when it happened. That's what they told me anyway. But besides that, I mean, it's like it just seems like it's like a humdrum scenario where it's no real drastic changes taking effect. That really affects people's everyday lives.
Right.
But what do you think has to happen in politics?
Stop voting the same people in
Yes.
office. I mean,
He
the
said
reality
better
is
than
that every day, every time I'm hearing it where people, and Crystal's hearing this, I'm going to let her talk about this, because I'm hearing this all the time. Now, before, when I started running, people were like, yes, it is time for change. we need to bring the new people in and go ahead and sweep, what did this woman say? Sweep them out. But then, these same people are just like, I need a sample ballot so that I can vote.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that you want change, but yet you're looking for something that can guide you on how to vote. So you're not even, if you want change, you will be looking people up, you will be asking questions,
Be
you'll be
involved.
stay informed. And you know what? Those people that play with our politics and those white men that people often refer to, they guarantee, they rely on the fact that in our African American community, our people are going to take what was given at the poll. In fact, there's people planning on it. They're going to look at this. They're going to be like, okay, Crystal says vote for this. Okay, vote that's that.
And we
And
vote
then-
on popularity.
Yeah.
We vote
A
on
name,
who.
a
or
name
name
that you've seen
recognition.
before. Like you've seen a sign. That's why that's why the signs are so big in this county, other than other counties,
Right.
because people
You
say,
don't
look,
see that in
if-
Montgomery
right,
County.
you don't see that in Howard County. You see it in
Wow.
Montgomery County. The reason why is because people are just like, if you can drive down the street and see 8 signs of the same name, you're gonna vote for it.
Yep.
Because you're not gonna look them up. You're not gonna ask any questions.
Nope.
You're gonna vote on them. So I can't. I'm hearing people saying they're anti. It's time for a change, and then when I ask them who they're voting for, they're telling me names that they commonly see.
Right.
What do you think needs to happen to change that? Because you're saying stop voting for the same people.
Yeah.
First of all, why is that happening? And second of all, what needs to be done so that we can see that shift where people are not doing that outside of education?
Ooh, outside of education, because I think you always say outside of education, but the key, and this is the activist organizer me,
Okay.
I can't help
you're
but say,
fine.
is that we have to start taking more responsibility for who we elect in office. Because
Right.
as an organizer, I usually come from the side behind the scenes where I'm just knocking on doors for other people. And the conversations I would have way before I decided to run for office, people were completely apathetic, especially my generation, millennials, to what's going on. And I think that we have to understand that these people have, I always tell people when they say they're not going to vote, I would be so on board with you if that would break the system. But it won't. because if only one person shows up to vote,
It's
that
a vote.
the person that one person cast the vote for, they are going to be in control for the next 4 years. So that's what we have to realize, that you're, by not voting or being disengaged that way, you're not breaking the system. But if we all showed up and voted like
It would be-
against the machine, you would break it, because then they would look differently, because they still want power.
Yeah.
But then they would be forced to say, oh, this is what they care about. Well, I'll deliver this because I want to get elected again.
Yes.
And so I'll shift, because what they do now, they look at super voters and they say, well, this community right here, they vote all the time. So this is where I need to care about for the next 4 years to
Okay.
guarantee I get elected
Very
again.
strategic.
So they're very strategic. So whatever they want, they'll get.
Oh, interesting.
But everywhere else, they're
It's
not going to
ignored.
get it. They're
Yeah.
ignored because they didn't donate to anyone's campaign. They didn't show up to vote in numbers. But I promise you, everyone running, the first thing their campaign manager or the person doing their field is going to say, let's cut out the super voters. That's who you need to spend your time on as a candidate. They're like, why are you over there? They don't vote.
Oh, interesting. So so what
Yeah.
I'm hearing is, if you don't vote, you actually hurting yourself
Yes.
more because you're not getting the
But
benefits.
vote smart. So I think
Yes.
that's actually the biggest problem, because
Yeah.
actually, even in the
That's true,
communities
too.
that highly vote, because I have them in my district, some of
Mhm.
the highest voting precincts in this county are in my district.
Which is where?
And Upper
Bowie?
Marlboro, Upper
Mhm.
Marlboro, around Henry Wise, like down there in the off Ritchie Road. That's one of the highest ones. Even Clinton has some of the highest.
Mhm.
And here's what I would say about this is that we have actually, in those communities, we've done a good job saying your ancestors fought for you to vote,
Yeah.
because they are voting higher in some of these precincts than the white precincts.
Yeah.
So that's the reality. But what I'm seeing is that they're voting, but blindly,
Mm-hmm.
because they feel like, okay, I made it to the poll.
I did
You
my
know,
job.
that I did my job.
Yeah,
Mhm.
check off.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's it. And
Right.
like, you know, they're just like voting, and then they're walking out, and then they're mad. They're like, I want a nice Nordstrom's in my community. Well, if you want a Nordstrom's in your community, you got to vote differently, because the people that've been in office for 20 years ain't
Ain't
giving
doing
you know. And you know what? And one of the politicians in my district, this is what he said to me. He was like, "Look, I've been in office for 20 years. Everybody gonna vote for me no matter what."
Mhm.
Wow.
And that's it. No matter what.
Don't
I don't
gotta knock
have
on
to,
a door.
I don't have to knock on a door.
Wow.
I don't have to go to a community meeting. I don't have to
Mhm.
go anywhere, because I will be voted no matter what. I don't have to
Wow.
I wish that the community can make that shift and
Wow.
Yes.
not that arrogance,
Right.
right down.
Yeah,
Right.
because
Because-
I would imagine if you come in the door like that, then what motivation do you have to do anything?
That's
when
so-
you're in that
Right,
seat.
right.
You just hit the nail on the head. Even
Yeah.
with the slates, when people are figuring out the tickets or how they're going to run, like Walla mentioned, there's people that their entire campaign is the slate. They're not planning on knocking on doors, they're not planning on doing any of
Wow.
that, because all they did was make the right deal behind closed doors to get on the right slate that's going to push them across the threshold. They feel like they don't have to do the work.
And the slate, what the slate means is you're going to get a barrage of mailers.
Mm-hmm.
And then the barrage of mailers that you get are going to say, vote for these 5 people, and here's a sample ballot
Mhm.
to vote for these 5 people and all the people we like. And we're going to put names and faces on the front so that you'll open it and vote for it, because we know that you're not going to pay attention. The biggest problem in that African American community and African diaspora, I would say that, is that we have told ourselves is we have to vote, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually
Yeah.
the biggest problem,
Right there.
because that we don't hold anybody accountable, because we don't go to anything. We're not involved. One guy is one of my mentors, and he is, he's a white guy, but he was saying, you know what, sometimes he was like, I'm going to be honest. In the black community, the problem is that the politicians are not scared of the people. The difference between Prince George's and some parts of Montgomery and Bethesda is that those politicians are deathly scared of the people who they represent, because if they cross them,
They're out.
They're out.
they will retaliate.
Mhm.
And we're not doing the same thing in our communities. We are allowing, like, I'm knocking on doors and people are telling me that schools is the biggest issue, right? But yet and still, you have a state delegation that passed zero education bills.
Mm-hmm.
You had bills for smaller classroom sizes.
Mhm.
You had bills to put the school board
Or
back to
back.
fully elected.
Mhm.
You had a variety of bills that would allow our top officials to be held accountable.
Mhm.
And yet and still not one person passed it because somebody called them and said, if you vote on those bills, if you even hold a hearing on those bills, you're going to suffer. So you know what? Those politicians decided they're more scared of that one phone call than
you.
the voters they represent.
Mhm.
So I'm listening to the political game that's happening. It sounds like just a game.
Mhm.
Now I
like a
feel
lot
like
of
to even
corruption.
exactly. So I'm looking at you ladies and I'm thinking this must take a lot of courage
Yeah.
to go in and think that you can change things
Mhm.
and not just change things but things that have been that way for a very, very long time.
Right.
Where does that courage come from for you ladies?
Yeah, the
For,
motivation.
for me,
Yeah.
I got involved in just being an activist when I was really young. For me, it started when my dad was almost deported from this country, and I always tell the story. And I try not to get emotional because I'm really close to my dad, and it was just a simple mistake on his paperwork, right? And they questioned his whole life, right? If his marriage to my mom was real, even though he had 3 kids, and we all had to testify. And that one person was it to decide if my dad could stay here. So that person's compassion changed my entire life. And so in that moment, I realized that power and that lack of power you have when you're not in the right position. And so from then on, I said that I'm always going to fight and advocate for people because there's always going to be someone that's like I was in that moment. They were scared and powerless, and everything about their life was in someone else's hands.
Someone else's hands.
And if they didn't care enough to listen, if they weren't compassionate enough to understand, you could truly change and damage someone. And so when I think about that, and I get frustrated with current elected officials sometimes because I'm sure, like Walla, I've sat there and listened to some of the excuses of why they're not going to do something.
Right.
And it's simply like she said, they're scared of one person. One person that doesn't even live in your community told you not to do something. But you have people over here that are sometimes literally dying because we don't even have free PrEP and PEP for HIV and AIDS, but we're number 2 in Prince George's County to Baltimore. That doesn't make sense to me when there's money that we can have. I mean, those are the types of things that when I think about that this is a nasty thing, politics,
Yeah.
or when I think I'm tired because it's a lot, I think about what I want to do and the life I want to change. And I say to myself, it's worth everything for that. And a long time ago, I decided I'm going to give my life to people. That's why I left corporate America and dedicated my life to this. And so for me, this is just another way of serving. It's just taking it to a level where my microphone is bigger and the power is bigger. Because now we have the vision, right? And we've been doing the advocacy work. But now it's time to make sure the money and the legislation follows it. It matches it. Yeah.
You know, I have a story because I watched someone over time. I got involved in politics in Maryland when I was in college. I interned, and I met a young person while I was there who was really ready to take over the world and make a change. And he was first, newly elected, and he just focused on progressive things to really make a change in our community. He was really committed to that. And I watched over time, he said he was doing all this stuff for the people. He wasn't getting a response from them, but then he was getting all this pressure from the top folks asking him to do things he did not want to do. He did not believe in. And he said that it started to wear on him because at first he fought them, but then he realized that fighting them is harder. Because when they come after you, it's weary. It makes you weary, and then you turn. And then he said, as he turned and started doing what they wanted, life got easier.
Wow.
And life got easier because he didn't have to worry about them coming after him. And to be honest, it was easier to have to
Interesting.
follow them than, and instead he didn't have the pressure from the people he represented, or really the sort of gratefulness from the people he represented, because he's like, they're not paying attention anyway. So now he's gone completely dark, and he's a lobbyist making all this money. But here's the thing: is I've watched his transition, and now I'm kind of like, wow, what happened to that guy? What happened to that guy is that he went to office alone. He ran against a ticket. He got in. Or the slate, or whatever we call him here. He ran against establishment. He got in. He fought them. They wore him down. and there was no one else there to stand beside him. So he said, I free myself. But here's the problem is that if we continue to allow that to happen, then we're going to there's a lot of people that I've seen over the years that have the same story as him. They came in
Good people,
wanting change, but they turned. And why? Because they felt that if they stood up, there would be a target on their back and they would have to leave politics because they would be so stressed out. The reality is that this Trump election has woken a lot of people up, but it got me because I said, you know what, enough of me standing on the sidelines, watching this happen while I'm advocating in the community, and then, I'm tired of telling someone, well, you know how it is, you know how they gonna do, you know how
they're not really gonna do
this ain't really, you be like, why the bill ain't go through? Well, you know how you folks are, everybody, ain't the one to stand up, and it's all good. We'll just try next year, knowing next year is still not gonna work.
Yes.
So now it's time for us to turn to a new page. This year, we have an entire group of candidates running that are not supported by the state. In fact, they was even telling me, one former congressman was telling me that someone who's running for Senate called him and was like, I've never seen, why are all these people running? Like, what is going on? But they don't want that because they want to keep us blind, right, as people. So why am I willing to fight the system?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to see another one of my friends like that. Defeated and deciding that it's not worth it. Let me go make money, or let me sit with the people, with the stack and with the corporations instead of really fighting a good fight because I'm too tired. It's
So
time
getting in the game, it sounds like. So,
Yeah.
but even with that, what you just described, it breaks my heart because it's so real. But how do you prevent even that from happening? So what happens if you two beautiful, good-natured women get in there and have that same fight? How do we fight against
we have
that?
each other. That's the difference. It's like this time I'm not going to go in alone. I've got her. We've got a Senate candidate running, Delegate Angela Angel. We have a group of candidates all within the same District 7 includes part of 25.
Right.
So we're going to have a whole group of us that when they start coming after me, in fact, one of the things that a lot of progressive organizations have woken up, and I'm glad the progressive movement is starting to move, where they're saying we're starting a progressive caucus. We're going to have something that we can actually have people in and create the numbers to pass things that can make a difference.
Right.
And then if they come after us, guess what? Those people have less power if we say no. But what we need to do with this show needs to tell people is it's us. It's us. We have to actually, as a community, get up. We can't leave elected officials. The problem in our community is that people elect people and then they go to sleep.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they wake up 4 years later and be like, why they haven't done anything? Why weren't you asking that 2 years before? Because it wasn't an election year.
So what are the simple, basic things that people can do now that they're not doing?
Go to your civic association meetings. Go to Annapolis. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a committee where every time we have a hearing, because one of the things, I wasn't even thinking about this, in Montgomery County, they have their meeting for their delegation, like in nighttime. Why? Because they want the constituents to see them. They go, because the constituents probably demand. In Prince George's County, we have it on Friday morning. Can't nobody get there.
No.
That's one of the things that we need to focus on. Friday, enough of this Friday morning. Let's put it where the people can see us.
Yeah.
Because that's how things get by. Because people vote
Simple
in darkness.
things.
Like this, or
Simple
maybe
things.
we need to start busing. Maybe we need to have progressive organizations get together, start busing folks up to Annapolis. Because then that way people can be watched.
Yeah, because they bust you out there for
Right.
dinner, but not
Right.
for no hearing.
Y'all speaking.
It's not for no
They
hearing.
they have delegation night, right?
Yeah.
And the delegation night, everybody comes out with their nice suit. They say, we're working hard for you while they feeding you lasagna and me with lasagna with your garlic bread.
Yes.
And you eating it and just thinking, well, it's so nice to be in Annapolis.
Yep. But if you try to bust people, we bust some group out for Senate Bill 122, which was for us, it was leading down more for mass incarceration because it increased mandatory minimums. We had people up there at 9 a.m. and we didn't know where we were on the list. So they kept on pushing us down further and further and further. So by the time we actually got to testify, it was close to 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Wow.
So a lot of people left because they kept
It's done
moving
by
us.
design.
It's done by design.
Wow.
So they didn't want
Yeah.
us there to hear them talk about
Yeah.
it. They didn't want. us on,
So much corruption.
they didn't want to hear us really, because they love us, that many people to come out there for this night, but they don't want us to come out there to really be part of the system. And another thing easy people could do is research the people that are running for office.
Yeah.
Like, that is huge to me, because I feel like you can get a lot from going out to a forum to hear these people speak.
Right.
You can get a lot from going back to even looking at their history. Look at what they did the day before they filed. I mean, literally, because people have this window, but like, because you laugh because it's reality. Like, they were running for like 6 months, and that's their whole advocacy career is 6 months long.
Yeah.
That is it. Because
Gotcha.
they literally started because they ran for office.
Gotcha.
Ask them what they did 5 years before they decided to run.
Nice. Okay.
Because it's planned. It was all orchestrated. They weren't really in the community. They weren't really doing anything. Because a lot of people will use, well, they were coming to all my meetings, my civic association meetings. I will say, well, that's because they're running for office. I said, but ask them, what is it that they were doing with their time? Like, what was it that was driving them? Because no one is going to every single one person's civic association meetings unless they're elected, right?
Right.
Because you might be a part of just your civic association meeting. You might do a lot in your community, but you're not going to be crossing into all these different areas. So I said, ask that person what they are doing and what they have accomplished tangible in their community over the years. And if they can't give you anything but they have shown up and spoke at your meeting, that is a red flag.
Yeah.
They were planning all along. These people planned out.
Yeah.
In fact, some of these people are
Years in
promised
advance.
positions years in advance.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been hearing of people that saying those are the worst folks because they don't do anything. They wait for the boat ride to pick them up so they can.
They weren't
get
in
the victory.
line.
Yeah.
They went for their turn because
Right.
people were handpicked. Because for both of us, in a lot of different races, they had decided who they wanted. The machine, for lack of a better word, they decided exactly who they wanted in the office. And people like probably myself and Walla are throwing a wrench in that plan because we're actually doing the work that the constituents deserve in the
Right.
sense of going out to the community,
Right.
knocking on the doors, being accessible, we're competent, things that they don't like to see, sadly.
So I imagine these people, the iron hands, the big hands, these are what? Major corporations, people that have deep pockets
Yes,
that
I
just
really
want,
wish, honestly, what I want to do, if I had $1 million, I would mail out finance reports. Because I want people to see, that's where people, nobody's reading them finance reports.
Except for us.
Except for us. People are running
money's
it. You want to know what is
Yeah.
finance reports, right?
Right.
So campaign finance reports, when you get, in order for, this was an effort to see where the money comes
Yes.
from, like
Be
keep some
transparent.
transparency. We as candidates are supposed to submit finance reports.
Yeah.
And finance report says how much money you have to report every donation and every
I
expenditure.
thought it was only 6,000 you can get per.
Well,
Mm.
watch it because if you
per
want to
donate.
Yeah.
if you want to give now, what did I do?
Right
If
around that.
if I own this corporation here, let's just say I own eLife Media, y'all all work for me. I would say, okay, I really like this person. I can only give them 6,000. So I'm gonna give this person 6,000. My name and your name. Your name.
Right.
That's how you get around it. So then it's all eLife. They have eLife, so you know that it's eLife because you'll have the address, and maybe the resident agent will be the same, but it'll be 6,000 for each person.
Oh wow! So they beat that system too. That's how what that man just went
Loopholes.
to jail for. That Trump pardon, the Suresh guy or something that Obama sent to jail for doing that, and then Trump pardoned him because he was a Trump supporter.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, then there's ways. That some of those are more egregious. So some of
Yeah.
those is what is those things is like even super PACs kind of do this now. So one of the things with some of the Trump stuff is that a lot of times people are paying for things that should be reported, should be like campaign things, but they're not because they're kind of taking it in another channel. But legally, what people do is that if they really want to get some money in, they really like, we need this person to get in. We don't want to have to deal with having to pick each individual. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a super PAC.
Yeah.
And the super PAC doesn't have limitations. So everybody that wants to support this person, just give to the super PAC. You can give a super PAC $3 million, and we're gonna just crowd them, and we'll send the same thing. Now the law is like you cannot collaborate, which people try to say. So collaborate means we can't sit in the same room and be like, okay, so what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing?
Okay.
So now if there's any evidence of that, so people don't really have meetings on these things. It just
Right.
they understand. They have some, so then they kind of
Money
start
talks.
sending money.
Money
Yeah,
talks.
I understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these mailers that you receive where they say working family people and all that, a lot of these people, those mailers are funded actually by corporations.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
It's like, because if you're giving money to a campaign,
Mhm.
I mean, it ain't like you giving the money so that people can go on vacation or
Right.
something or buy a brand new Lexus,
Mm-hmm.
or do you?
No,
I mean,
you
That's
would
not
go to
why
jail.
you
But
go to
it's-
jail for that. But the main thing is, everyone talks about the pay to play, right? Like you're buying or investing in a vote or a favor or something down the line.
Yeah.
And then you also
Pretty
have to
much.
look at some of these people, what their profession is outside of their elected office. Because it's different for the role I'm running for, but it's really prevalent in Annapolis.
Okay.
What do those people do when they're not legislators?
Yeah.
Right? And that's how sometimes that can shape the policies that they go for,
I
money,
see.
because you have a lot, the bail bonds industry, for example, puts a lot of money in people's campaigns. So you'll have a lot of bills that help keep prisons open because they want to
Because
keep
it
them
helps. Because
happy.
it helps. Because of,
Yeah.
So, like for instance, like I said before, there are certain candidates that take a lot of corporate donations because the corporations really don't like unions or working families or
Yeah.
even minimum wage. Like,
Yeah.
So then
Right.
they give them a lot, and then they kind of hold that stuff up.
Right.
But here's the thing: is that whenever they put their media, their campaign propaganda, the law kind of allows them to kind of loosely say what they they can propaganda can be what it is. So if that same person says, "I fight for working people," all this stuff, I fight for small businesses,
Mhm.
really it's misleading
Mhm.
because they don't. And then frankly, when you look at the campaign finance report, you see all this money from AT&T and this and that
Yeah.
and all these people. So then you're like,
Where's
you're
the
not,
small businesses you
right,
fight
where's the
for?
small business that you're
Yeah.
fighting for?
Not on the list.
Yeah, so that,
We have a question. We actually have a question. What you guys plan to assist grassroots nonprofit organizations?
That's a great question. I feel like that is something that the county, to me, hasn't done a good job. And we give a lot of money in nonprofit, but I think it doesn't actually go to the organizations that are doing the hands-on work.
Right.
So I think that's part of the problem is the way a lot of the grants are written, because it automatically has people that cannot get the funds. Because sometimes they'll have these thresholds that you need to hit, or a certain capacity that if you are a small organization, you haven't gotten there. And the double end of that is you need the money to get there, right? And so I think we need grant programs that focus on a lot of nonprofits that are at that infancy stage, that they don't have the capacity yet. We're trying to help them build the capacity. And I think that sometimes we have a lot of regulations on some of the nonprofits that hurt them from doing the work. Like one organization I work with, Each One Feed One, they literally give out fresh produce every Tuesday and Thursday, but get not $1 from the county. And it's because they don't ask for, I need to know exactly how much you make, exactly where you live. They say if you're hungry and you need food, we'll give it to you.
Right.
But because they do that, you won't give them money. And so we have to understand how do we want to make sure the money is going into serving people in our community and our residents, and that it's fair, but how do you do that in a way that still allows these nonprofits that are on the ground doing the work to be able to grow and thrive? And I think part of that is how do we rewrite the grant structure program, and then also, even if it's donating trucks, one of the things they just needed was a truck, even if you can't give them money.
Right.
Can you donate some of these old vehicles?
Right.
So it's ways of looking at all the things that these businesses and nonprofits need, and figuring out what we can do on the county level to help them grow.
well, I just want to add that I think that we got to focus the nonprofit funding. I would say there are a lot of problems that I know are happening, and frankly, like sometimes I'm confused as like who's getting the money.
Yes.
Like for instance, like right now we have issues with STEM, right? We have kids that need good jobs. We need to actually really invest in nonprofits that focus in on those issues. How to train our kids, how to get our kids good jobs, how to get our kids into fields that can make sure that they thrive. And some of those people are not getting funding, and I'm seeing other folks get that funding. So I think we need to actually focus our funding more on things that we know are a necessity. Like for instance, frankly, our seniors have been complaining about transportation. They have nonprofits that want to focus in on transportation. We need to fully fund those so that we can make sure that these they don't have to spend money on, why give money to an organization that's not providing proper service when you have others that are interested. So definitely.
We're running out of time.
Yeah.
We got about 5 minutes left, but I do want to get this question in. This is so off base of what we're talking about, but I'm a history buff. And I was just curious about, at one time, black people had to answer a series of questions before they were given the right to vote. And, you know, at one time back in, you know, was that something that took place for everybody? I mean, did
No,
everybody?
so let me explain what the issue was. It was that test was made to make sure that black people didn't vote.
Okay.
And the reason why is because the white men that put it in place knew that if the test was asked, many black people would fail, because at the time, this was shortly after slavery.
Yeah.
Black people were not
Illiteracy,
able
yeah.
to, you know, black people really didn't have the education to know how to answer many of the questions.
Right.
So they knew that if they asked that, first of all, women couldn't answer those questions, and neither could people of color at that time.
But were the questions for was that a law on the books that everybody had to answer questions before they had the right to vote? Or was it just for black people?
No, so what they would do was that they would put these tests together. It was the jurisdictions that were doing, various jurisdictions. It wasn't everybody. They were putting these tests, it was going to call like a pull test. And basically they would give it to you that you would have to fill it out. But understand, at that time, there was no transparency, there were no computers,
Right.
no, like, you know, this type of thing. So frankly, to be honest, it's no telling that person probably got them all right, and the person said you didn't
Right.
pass the test.
It was
You
just
can't vote.
something to
Right.
say, oh, well, this is the reason why.
This is the reason why you can't vote because you. But then also the test was made. We have this thing called disparate impact. I'm a lawyer, and it's called disparate impact. And disparate impact is that if you put a law forward knowing that a certain group is not going to be able to fulfill it. So if you say, I mean, the simplest, we have that even in employment where they implement things that they know would have a disparate impact on African American communities. So meaning that African American communities will be like, there's been talk about testing and how some of this testing leads to African American communities African Americans not being able to pass. So what is going on with the testing? But in general, there are some laws that they've put in place, and there's a test as to whether the constitutional test is whether this is discriminatory. And it's if it's overtly discriminatory, that means it says something like black people are terrible, and that's why we didn't. You know, of course, that's not the case. But sometimes not overt, but sometimes institutional racism allows you to implement something that you know that a certain color could not pass. It's like going to a bunch of Hispanic kids that just, grew up in Hispanic families, can't speak English, and asking them to answer questions in long, big words that they knew they couldn't understand.
Right.
You know that almost none of them will pass it. And then if you put some white kids next to them, those white kids who grew up in the families that speak English will be able to pass them. So if you give that test, you know that at the end of the day, you know what the outcome will be. But you're just saying, but then you're trying to, because of course you're not going to openly say, I did this to make sure Hispanic people are not going to get this test. What you'll say is like, look, we put the test together.
Right.
The Hispanics didn't pass. We tried.
Wow.
So,
Well, family, we have run out of time. This conversation can go on all night long. I am fascinated by all this. We have to get you guys back on because this is so much. It has so many more questions that
They
it
covered
need to get
so
around
exactly.
to.
They covered so many different things. I'm just like, wow, really?
Yes.
well, it's
Thank
an
you for
honor. I'm glad
educating
for
us.
you all educating because we're trying to get the word out.
Yes.
And the Washington Post ain't going to listen to us, right?
No. No.
Well, again, this is the Empower Hour. We do this every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. We didn't even get a chance to get to our promos, actually, but we definitely will get back to you on that next week. And until next time, we'll see you.